I'd like to welcome all of our loyal viewers to our very first episode of Sports Triad.
Pull up a chair, folks. 3 Lances on the line. Scoreboards lit up early. We got games to unwind. From the bleachers to the back roads, we're calling every play. Who's hot, who's hurt, who's rising, and who just slipped away. Hear that crowd get louder. Feel that Friday frame. We got boots on the sideline and fire in the name. 3 Lances, Sports Triad. Bring the sports news home. 3 Lances, Sports Triad. Every win gets known. 3 Lances, Sports Triad. Tell it straight, tell it proud. 3 Lances, Sports Triad. Turn the whole town loud.
Roundtable discussion. This is being recorded on June 14th, 2026. Our weekly panelists are myself, Ken, your humble novice host, who has opinions not based on any facts whatsoever. Steve, a self-described computer engineer genius who thinks his opinions are based on facts. And Tyler, a sports director for a well-respected radio station who actually does have opinions that can be backed up with facts. We'll start each week with our diamond trivia question. And the only thing harder than that are diamonds themselves. So, Steve, lead us off with this week's question.
All right. And this week, I'm going to use one of my favorite topics, which is the draft. And I'm going to go back to the 1983 draft. And that draft was famous for quarterbacks. And 3 Hall of Fame quarterbacks were chosen in the first round. So the question is, which team had the number 1 pick, and which of the 3 Hall of Fame quarterbacks did they select? We'll give Tyler a chance to answer that at the end, but if our viewers want to, they can put their guess in the comments.
All right, that's a good opening question. I think I've got some ideas for that one, but like you said, we'll let our viewers think on that one, and we'll answer it a little later in the show.
All right, so let's start today's discussion with what's new in the news. Steve, you want to start us out?
Yeah, well, I think the big news here is the NBA Finals, which finished up last night. And my question to Tyler here was, were the Knicks just one of those teams that were destined to win this year?
Well, it kind of seems that way based on this playoff run. I mean, going into the playoffs, I think you kind of looked at it thinking the West was way stronger than the East this year, especially when the Boston Celtics got upset in the first round by Philadelphia. You know, you kind of looked at what OKC had coming back from last year. You looked at the Spurs of Wemby. You know, Lakers were kind of coming together late in the season. Minnesota Timberwolves too. Like, the West looked really, really strong this year. And I think it almost kind of wore itself down by the finals. And then, you know, just the way the Knicks played, I mean, they had a pretty dominant postseason run, but even within some of those series, they had some pretty remarkable comebacks. I mean, their game 1 comeback against the Cavs was pretty crushing to watch as a Cavs fan. But, you know, within the finals 2 against the Spurs, I mean, 3 of the 4 Knicks wins, I believe, they were down by 15 plus points. So this was one of those all-time postseason runs. You know, it was a little like what the Pacers did last year to a certain extent, except Pacers obviously didn't quite finish off the finals of a title. They lost in Game 7 to OKC. So, yeah, this was one of the weirder NBA playoffs I think I can ever remember, just with how weak the Eastern Conference looked on paper, and maybe the way you could have written off the Knicks a little bit going into the finals just based on, well, you know, they beat some lower seeded teams. They beat the number 6 seed, they beat the number 7 seed, and they beat the number 4 seed. So, you know, who had they really beaten going into the finals? But they kind of proved that was a much better team than I think most people gave them credit for.
Yeah, I think so too. And all I could think about was, if they blow it, man, New York is just going to be crushed. I mean, people have put so much stock into them winning it. It was pretty incredible to watch.
It was. And, you know, the other thing that's kind of interesting about this year's Knicks team is I think they have a few players, maybe cast-offs is the wrong word, but like guys who weren't originally of the Knicks early on. Like you think about their coach, Mike Brown, he's been fired 4 other times, before landing at the Knicks. And people thought it was a crazy move when the Knicks fired, Tom Thibodeau and moved on and got Mike Brown with, some of the playoff runs they've made in recent seasons. Jalen Brunson, their best player, he started at Dallas. And, I think you could ask the Mavericks fans how much they regret. Man, we could have Jalen Brunson and Luka Doncic on our team right now, but that's probably a whole other topic. But, Karl Anthony Towns, another guy, used to be in Minnesota, now of New York. So I think maybe that's more of a credit to New York's front office than anything for being aggressive and, A, bringing in the right coach, and B, bringing some pretty established players who are good with other teams but maybe went to a new level this year of New York.
Mike Brown, that's a familiar name. Where have I heard that before?
Yeah, so if folks remember LeBron James's first run in the Cavs before he left the first time around, Mike Brown would have been the head coach for the Cavs back when they went to the finals in 2007. And he actually had a second stint coaching the Cavs as well during LeBron's stint in Miami. Mike Brown was our coach briefly then in the middle of that. So, yeah, if you're a Cleveland fan, you're pretty familiar with Mike Brown.
Yeah. Ken, got a question for you.
All right.
How much would you be willing to pay for a nosebleed seat for the finals?
For the finals?
Madison Square Garden. How much would you pay?
I would be willing to pay $200. Would that get me a nosebleed seat?
Not even face value.
I don't even think $200 in New York would get you a regular season ticket, or it'd be close to that.
I think, and I looked this up and I can't remember the price, but I think the nosebleeds, I think that might get you a nosebleed during the regular season, but I'm not sure. The face value on the ticket is $900 for the worst seat.
Wow.
And the street value was $4,000
for the worst seat.
Yeah. Guess how much you couldn't even get the first row. I mean, those just nobody was going to sell you theirs. Guess how much people were paying for a second row seat?
I would guess $30,000.
75.
Wow.
Wow.
That's nuts.
Yeah. Tyler, do you think sports is starting to price out like the average fan? I mean, I understand this is New York and it's, the finals, but, with prices like that, are the average fans being relegated to like watch parties or, just on TV?
I think to a certain extent, especially playoff tickets, I think that's definitely true. I do still think you have, especially Major League Baseball, regular season can still be pretty affordable, especially if you have a lower tier Major League team around you. Will say, those weekday Major League games, I think you can still get some pretty good prices on StubHub. But yeah, like bigger markets, weekend games, really in any sport, like I think any NFL game pretty much, besides like the worst of the worst teams in the league, like you're shelling up multi-$100 in a lot of cases. And it's not really just the tickets, honestly. I mean, you think about how expensive parking is, how much you pay for concessions, if you want a drink or two at the game, like you're pretty quickly getting into like the $400-$500 range, depending on where you want to sit, not to mention the travel to get to the game. So I've kind of had that sense a little bit as well too.
Yeah. A great value is the minor league games.
Yeah.
I was looking up, and you can go see an Akron Ducks game for like $5 if you want to sit in the bleachers. It's incredible.
Yeah.
Here's a trivia question. Here's a trivia question for you, Steve. We went to a Guardians game this week, and across the street from the stadium, parking. So it's close. What do you think parking is anywhere close to the stadium? I'm
going to say $40.
60.
Okay.
Now it was against the Yankees, so maybe that got him another $10. I don't know.
Yeah. All right.
Okay.
What do we got, Ken?
Well, moving along, As a fan, Tyler, what were your first thoughts on the Myles Garrett trade?
Yeah, well, I have a lot of thoughts on the Myles Garrett trade, but yeah, I'll start with purely the emotional, like fan side of things before we maybe get a little more analytical about it. I mean, from a fan standpoint, it just kind of stinks. I mean, look, you drafted this guy number 1 overall, and he lived up to all expectations. I mean, I don't think you could have asked for anything more from Myles Garrett during his time in Cleveland. You could run down the statistics, you can run down the Pro Bowls, you can talk about the single season sack record from last year. Like individually, throw out the team record for a minute here. Like you couldn't ask for anything more individually from Myles Garrett. Like he could not have performed better as a number 1 pick from what you got. And that's the kind of guy, I mean, you don't get guys like that very often on your team. I mean, maybe the closest comparison to a guy of that kind of talent and that kind of success on the field in recent seasons would be like a Joe Thomas. And part of what made Joe Thomas so special is he was a lifetime Cleveland Brown. He never took a single snap with any other team. And I think all Browns fans wanted that to be the same for Myles Garrett. I mean, I'm going to be sick week 1 of the regular season when I'm turning on Sunday Night Football and I see Myles Garrett wearing a Rams uniform, lining up and getting his first sack. I mean, I'll be happy for him because I like Myles Garrett, but like, it's just going to make me sick watching him do that for another team. And the other thing, too, I mean, I don't think it's crazy to think that Myles Garrett has the all-time NFL sack record for a career in his mind sometime down the line, too. And, that's the kind of thing like, man, if he had stayed in Cleveland his whole career and been able to do that here, that would have been something special. And I keep using the word sick, but I'll be happy for him. But if he goes out and does that for the Rams or any other team for that matter, there's going to be a part of you that just says as a Browns fan, that should have been with us. That should have been with us. And the final thing I'll just say from a fan perspective, it kind of feels like an end of an era, right? When we drafted Myles, and then the very next year we had the draft where we got Baker number 1. We drafted Denzel Ward. We drafted Nick Chubb and a few other guys. Like that era of Browns football is officially over now, this Myles Garrett trade. Joel Bitonio just announced his retirement. We lost Nick Chubb in free agency. He played for Houston last year. Like the guys that we got in that era, the guys who got us in the playoffs in 2020, some of those 2023 guys who were with us during that playoff team, the coaching staff, like that's all over now. Like I think this is the Browns officially closing the door on that era of football and any remnants of it and saying, we're in a full rebuild now. We kind of have in the last couple of years, but any residue from that era is pretty much gone at this point.
Yeah, I gotta agree with you from a fan point of view. I mean, when I saw it, first thing I thought was clickbait. They just want me to click that link. No way we traded Myles Garrett, a first round Hall of Famer, possibly the GOAT, so, but, I guess football's a business, right? So let me ask you this. I searched for a reason, and the only thing I can come up with is, what do you think of the argument on the age difference? And who did we get? We got
Jared Verse.
Yeah, he's 5 years younger, and he's a very good player. I mean, it's not like we didn't get anybody. Myles Garrett has been playing for 9 years, and I looked up some stats, just Hall of Famer defensive ends. Michael Strahan, he played for, I think it was 14 years. J.J. Watt played only 10 years. Reggie White played 15 years. Bruce Smith, if people remember him of Buffalo and Washington, he was the longest. He played 18 years. So with Garrett already having 9 years in, you got to think maybe he has 6 years, right? And that puts him near the top end of Hall of Fame defensive ends. Is that? Do you think the Browns can hang their hat on that?
Not a whole lot, to be honest. I mean, you're right. He's 30 now, so the clock is ticking to a certain extent. But like you said, I still think based on Myles not having too much of an injury history, I wouldn't be surprised to see him have 5 or 6 more really good years in his career. And in the NFL, I mean, that's a long time. I mean, teams can change a lot in 5 to 6 years. I think this was less about Myles turning 30 and more, I don't think the Browns felt they saw a path to winning this season. I mean, this is basically Andrew Berry and Jimmy Haslam coming out and saying, we are not going anywhere this season. We don't think we have a team that's capable of going to the playoffs, and we need to kind of build for the future. One analogy I'd kind of make, and this is the hopeful interpretation of what the Browns are doing. Think back to the Cleveland Indians of the early 1990s. That team was terrible. And they traded one of their best players, Joe Carter, and they got Carlos Baerga and Sandy Alomar Jr. in return. And those guys became the cornerstones, or at least a couple of them, of that mid-1990s run that the Indians had, where they went to the World Series a couple of times. They were in the playoffs every year. The sellout streak was going on. And I think how you can sort of make a parallel to what the Browns are trying to do now is the fact that, much like the Indians, they were moving from an old stadium to a new stadium. They knew that was coming in a few years. They were in a rebuild, and they said, we kind of want to time this rebuild up where we're just getting good right as we're moving to the new stadium so we can sort of max out on the fan excitement and drag that out. And it worked out beautifully for the mid-1990s Indians. I mean, that team accomplished everything besides winning the World Series, which, the postseason in baseball, it is what it is. It can be, maybe random's the wrong word, but it can be a little dicey at times in that way. I think that's kind of what the Browns are hoping to replicate. Can they or can't they? I think we can start to discuss that here. But do you guys think I'm onto something with maybe that analogy that the Browns are sort of looking at it the same way where, we've got the stadium set to open up, I think 2029. We've got 3 years here to sort of rebuild the team. And hopefully maybe this is the kind of trade that can bring us some future franchise cornerstones, some draft capital we can use in the next few seasons, and we'll be a Super Bowl contender once that new stadium opens.
I would, and I think that's probably what they were thinking. I think you're tapping into their thought process, but I got to question it with we very well could end up with the 32nd pick overall, which I kind of hope we do for Miles' sake. But and then the following year we could end up with with the second round, that's what, deep into the 50s probably. So with those, I mean, if we were getting a first through 10th round pick, then I'd be like, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. But when realistically, maybe it's not 32nd, but maybe it's 28th pick overall. I think that takes a lot of that argument away. What's your thoughts?
Yes, I think you're onto something with that. Because a lot of what I've read so far said the Browns got a pretty fair compensation for Myles Garrett, but I would go with your point where, like, barring a Matthew Stafford injury, I think the Browns wouldn't be getting a pick higher than, say, number 25. Like you said, the Rams are probably the betting favorites right now to win the Super Bowl. So if that's pick number 32, you're right. That's a late first rounder, which should still be a very good starter. But, that's not the same as, trading of like a lower tier team that you think might be picking in the top 10. And here's the other thing, too, that I'll do with this compensation thing. I was looking at some recent trades for top edge rushers and trying to compare it to what the Myles Garrett trade garnered. And I kind of came up with two trades that were comparisons. The first one, if you remember this, is when the Raiders were going to trade Max Crosby to the Ravens this offseason before the trade fell through. The Raiders were going to get 2 first-round picks in exchange for Crosby, and that was just going to be the whole compensation. No players involved or anything like that. The other trade that kind of came to mind was the big blockbuster when Dallas traded Micah Parsons to Green Bay. And I think that one's probably a little more comparable, just maybe based on age. And I think Parsons and Garrett are probably, a level ahead of Crosby as far as the defensive end tiers. But for Parsons, they were able to get Kenny Clark, a starting defensive lineman, and they got a couple of first-round picks out of that. So, on one hand, what the Browns got, Jared Verse, I think, is probably a more valuable player than Kenny Clark just because, A, he's a lot younger, and B, edge rushers are more valuable than interior defensive linemen in the trade market. So you could say, well, getting Jared Verse is kind of like getting a first-round pick. But then, yeah, like the future first we're going to be getting from the Rams, that's probably an end of the first-round type of pick. I just would have liked to have seen, one more first-round pick for Myles Garrett just because I think he is that special of a player. And, you have the contract security of knowing that you've got him for, locked up for a few years. And another thing, too, for the Browns, right now, they are clearly telling us that they don't think they're able to contend this year, which it stinks for a lot of reasons. As a fan, we've been told to be patient for so long, and they're telling us to be patient again for another year. But you look at where the Browns are this year versus last year, the schedule's a lot easier this year. If you look at the opposing teams' winning percentage from last season. The Browns actually have the easiest strength of schedule in the NFL. The last time we had that was going into 2023 and made the playoffs that year. And I'm not saying that they'd be a playoff team this year because I just don't think they have a quarterback right now to lead us to the playoffs. But, it just stinks from that perspective because, things kind of set up a little better for us this year schedule-wise, and especially with some of the young players you got in last year's draft. But, that kind of, I think, almost foils the Browns' rebuild strategy to a certain extent too, because what's the one piece we're missing? It's a quarterback. When do you get a quarterback? In the top 5 overall picks, maybe the number 1 overall pick. And I think the dangerous thing right now for the Browns, and I'll let you guys get in after I make this point, but I think the dangerous thing right now is this Browns team is not good enough to go to the playoffs, but this team is too good to get the number 1 or number 2 overall pick. And the team that gets the number 1 pick, they are not trading it away. The Browns don't have enough picks, even if the Rams pick, given to them in this trade. They don't have enough picks to move up to number 1. And even if they did, it's Arch Manning coming out in the draft. Like a team, the Jets or the Dolphins, whoever gets number 1, they're not trading that pick away. So the Browns are a quarterback away, but even in this quarterback-rich draft, if the Browns win 6, 7 games, however many this year, you end up at the number 9 pick, something like that. I don't know how confident I am the Browns are going to be able to get their quarterback of the future at that spot.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think you're looking at the third third quarterback pick probably for the Browns, something like that. So the 2 best quarterbacks will be gone by the time they pick, right?
Yeah, and it's tough too because as a fan, you don't want to root for your team to lose all these games, get the number 1 overall pick, but it's becoming so binary in the drafts these days where it's, if you don't have that number 1 overall pick, guys are staying in college a little bit longer too, and you don't know how the quarterback market will play out with injuries or guys staying in college or guys underperforming. It really kind of muddies your path to getting a quarterback next off season, I think.
Is there any trade you would have made for Myles Garrett, Tyler, or would you just kept him?
That's a tough one. I think if there had been 1 more first-round pick, I think he would have had to have really considered it because the path to winning is just so hard without a quarterback in this league. And, I think I've made my thoughts pretty clear with what I've talked about so far. I don't think Deshaun Watson is rediscovering his old form. I don't think Shadur Sanders is the quarterback of the future. I think the Browns need to find a way to get a quarterback next offseason. If you had offered me a starting caliber player plus 2 first-round picks, I would have thought really hard about taking that. Like I said, I would have liked just a little more than what they got. Like at the current offer, I almost would have just kept Myles Garrett for the season and seen if we could just have a top 5 defense and maybe somehow get our way to 8 or 9 wins that way. But yeah, if you'd gotten either 3 first-round picks or like a good starting player plus 2 first-round picks, I actually would have really considered that because even if you're not getting a quarterback for those picks, that would at least be, good for the rebuild they're trying to do.
Final question on this, and this is to both of you guys. Is Myles Garrett the GOAT, the greatest of all time?
I think he could become that. I do think with longevity, you probably need to play more than the 9 years he's played so far to be able to do that. The past someone like a Bruce Smith or like a Reggie White, career stat-wise. But, I think if Myles has, another 5 or so years where he's playing at a similar level to where he is now, I think he puts himself really in that conversation. The unfortunate thing about the GOAT debate, I think, is that people factor in maybe team success a little too much. And Myles is obviously not going to get the benefit of that from what happened in Cleveland during his tenure here. We never got to a Super Bowl. We never won a Super Bowl with him, but I'd always make the argument that wasn't really his fault. One of the things that you could count on year to year was an all-pro level performance from Myles Garrett. So, I don't think he's in the GOAT conversation yet, but I think if he has 4 or 5 more really good years, double-digit sacks, first or second team all-pro type of seasons, and, maybe he wins a Super Bowl for the Rams, and that kind of satisfies the, you're nothing if you don't have a ring crowd, then I think you have to have a real discussion if he's the GOAT or not if that happens.
I think you're going to see a renewed player this year, even though he never really gave up and he worked really hard. You have to get beat down year after year with losing, right? So you go into a situation like that, you're ready to go. So,
yeah, and even remember last offseason, this kind of gets lost when he had the big trade request, and then he got signed to that record-breaking contract, and that kind of all went underneath the rug. I do think that trade request probably was still in the back of his mind, for a long time, even heading into this offseason, even if he wasn't as public about it. I do think he wanted to go to an organization that, had much more of a recent track record of going to the playoffs and contending for Super Bowls.
Yeah.
Yep. One last final point. The Browns beat the Steelers late in the season when Miles was gone for the sack record. My contention on that, and I'm here and see if you can concur with this, is that Myles Garrett was responsible for that win because, the quarterback for the Steelers,
Rodgers.
Yeah,
Aaron
Rodgers was so worried about being the guy on the video of being sacked for the record that it totally took him out of his game, and he never pushed it. And I think that's why the Browns won it. Am I full of it, or do I have a good theory there?
No, that was one of the great final memories of Miles from that season, besides, of course, the record-breaking sack he got against Burrow the next week. It is funny. I mean, Aaron Rodgers is so insecure about all that stuff. Like, when we talk about the GOAT debate, I mean, Rodgers isn't quite the GOAT, but, like, you're a top 5 quarterback of all time, like, Super Bowl champion, and you're worried about, like, taking the record-breaking sack and, being on the poster essentially for Miles. Like, that's going to ruin your legacy or something. But I actually agree completely. Like, the Steelers came out in that game and they ran the ball 3 times in a row to begin the game. And then after that, I think you're right. I mean, it was short passes the whole game. It was Rodgers getting the ball out really, really quickly. It was a ton of attention on Miles. I mean, that's the thing too. Like, an edge rusher can win a game like that without getting a single sack just because of how much it disrupts the opposing team's offense. So I think you're right. I mean, with what Myles Garrett did in that game, I think that was the biggest deciding factor.
Yeah, very good. Well, moving on.
Uh-oh.
Uh-oh.
I think the storm got Ken. Well, let me, while he's trying to reconnect here, let me.
We just don't want you to have an easy time editing. We want you to have to actually do a little editing.
Yeah, see my skills there. So upcoming, you spend any time with hockey? You look at hockey much?
What are we moving
NHL?
on to? Steve, what's the head in sports?
Oh,
there he's back. There it is.
Perfect timing. Yeah, so the NHL championship, I think that's tonight. We're filming this on the June 14th. Tyler, you pay much attention to them?
I've got to be honest, I don't really pay much attention to the NHL. And, part of that is I'm a Clevelander through and through. I grew up in Cleveland, so I never really, we never had an NHL team in Cleveland, of course, growing up. Columbus was kind of the closest one, or Pittsburgh. So I never really followed it that closely. And then I never played hockey growing up. So I'll be honest, folks, if you want hard-hitting hockey analysis, I'm probably not necessarily the guy to turn to for that.
Yeah.
I do just kind of like making fun of Canada every time the U.S. wins another Stanley Cup and Canada has to go another year of the drought.
Yeah, I do like the sport though, but like you, I don't follow it much. But we had a roommate in college who played hockey, so we'd go watch him play. It's an exciting game, it really is. I mean, I think like if you gave soccer players sticks, it would be a much better game. So I don't know.
So you're able to hit him here with it.
That's big talk for the World Cup going on right now.
Yeah, I shouldn't do it. Sorry, soccer fans. You have a nice little sport there.
Oh my! Yes, as people who are listening can tell, we're a little more into the American version of football than we are to soccer.
All right. Well, Ken, are we up? We ready?
I think that brings us to the trivia question, Steve.
All right, Taylor. Let me just repeat it real quick. So 1983 draft, it was known as a great quarterback draft. 3 Hall of Fame quarterbacks in the first round. Which team and which player was drafted number 1?
Yes, if my memory serves me correctly, I believe that was the famous draft where the Colts took John Elway number 1 overall, and he ended up, of course, playing for Denver instead. But yes, it was actually the Colts who originally drafted him.
Oh, I thought I had you. I was sure you'd say Denver. So Yes, folks, it was the Baltimore Colts. The backstory there is John Elway was a very good baseball player. I think he was selected by the Yankees in the second round and probably would have gone higher, but everybody figured he'd play football. And he told the Colts, he said, "No, I'm not going to play for you guys." and the Colts didn't believe him, and they drafted him, and they tried to sign him, and he said no. And then so finally they traded him away to Denver for their first round pick that year. I think they had the 4th overall, and also a first round for the following years. So the Colts actually did good by drafting him and then trading him. So, but yeah, it's most people would say Denver. So I didn't fool you.
Nice trying that one. You're gonna have to step up your game for the next one.
Okay, and we have a bonus question. Maybe I'll get you on this one. Of those 3 quarterbacks, and by the way, the quarterbacks, go ahead, Tyler. Who were the quarterbacks? First round, 83?
Our first round, 83. So besides Elway, you had Marino being drafted as well. And I believe that was also Jim Kelly in the first round.
Yeah, that's right.
Wow.
Yep, those 3. So out of those 3 quarterbacks, which is the only one to have a receiving touchdown?
Whoa, that is a good question. All right, this is going to be a total guess on my part because I don't know the answer, but I have a 1 in 3 chance. So the only one of those 3 to get a receiving touchdown. I'll say Marino did it.
Yeah, it was Elway.
All right. 1 for 2, still batting 500.
Yeah, that I mean, that question is just a total guess.
All right. Well, that's a wrap for this week. I want to thank everyone for watching and listening. Please make sure you like, subscribe, and share this episode. And I'll leave you with this. If it's only a game, why are they paying Patrick Mahomes $500 million?
3 Lances Sports Triad. Bring the sports news home. 3 Lances Sports Triad. Every win gets known. 3 Lances Sports Triad. Tell it straight, tell it proud. 3 Lances Sports Triad. Turn the whole town